love coming here at dawn. This is a peaceful, beautiful place. This is the shrine of the Bab, who was born 200 years ago. Now, this place is full of joy and light, but at the time he was born, the world was really filled with the darkness of oppression for many people.
Shiraz, Persia. The young Bab is an extraordinary boy. His astonished teacher sends him home, saying there is nothing he can teach this gifted pupil. While other children play, the Bab prefers to pray and meditate alone. As he grows up to become a young merchant, he is admired for his piety, his gentleness, and his sense of justice. The lives of people throughout Persia will, in time, come to be transformed by his presence amongst them.
In the mid-19th century, there was a worldwide sense of messianic expectation. And in Iran, there was a young man named Mullah Hussein who not only felt this expectation, but was convinced that the promised one that he was searching for was already in the world and that it was his mission to search for him and find him.
A spring evening in 1844. Mullah Hussein, a young scholar and seeker after truth, is searching for the promised one. After many weeks of prayer and fasting, Mullah Hussein feels drawn, as if by a magnet, to the city of Shiraz, renowned for the sweet perfume of its roses and the melodies of its nightingales. At dusk, as he arrives wearily at the city gate, a radiant young man approaches Mullah Hussein and greets him as if he were a lifelong friend. Overwhelmed by this welcome, Mullah Hussein accepts an invitation to visit the stranger's home. During that momentous evening, a conversation takes place that will change Mullah Hussein's life and the entire course of human history. As their conversation continues into the early hours of morning, Mullah Hussein is astonished to discover that every answer he receives to his questions establishes beyond a shadow of a doubt his host's claim that he is the Bab, the promised one. Unknown to a sleeping world, the promised day of God has dawned.
Thanks to our girls, we are usually up at this time of the day. The girls are knocking on our door and demand to get in. So you have no choice but to get up. I find it so interesting that immediately following the declaration of the Bab in Shiraz, Persia at the time, halfway across the world, Samuel Morse was sending his very first Morse code from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore.
May 1844. For the first time in human history, a message is sent instantly from one city to another. The message, "What hath God wrought?"
And in a way, it's as if humankind had been given two means of communication at the same time. The declaration of the Bab opened the way for humanity to be unified in a spiritual sense. But the advancement in telecommunications since that very first Morse code has led to unprecedented development in science and technology that have unified mankind.
In the days and weeks after the Bab declared his mission to Mullah Hussein, several other individuals came to recognize the Bab independently, and the Bab sent them to different provinces to spread his teachings. Thousands responded, but this alarmed the authorities. Some refused to acknowledge any validity to what the Bab's teachings spoke of. But there were also some that were very attracted to these teachings.
When I learned about the Bab, I also discovered the story of Tahirih, and it touched me deeply. Tahirih was educated at a time when girls were not taught to read or write. Tahirih was the first woman to accept the teachings of the Bab. She understood that his teachings were different from those of the past and marked the dawn of a new era. And for this reason, one day she entered a gathering of men with her face uncovered, without a veil. This act was the cause of total shock for the men in that gathering. But by doing this, Tahirih demonstrated that it was now time to be rid of the prejudices and superstitions of the past and move into a new day.
Look up, look up, look up. Look up, look up, a dawning day draws its first breath. The world grows light, our souls begin to glow.
Thousands of followers of the Bab were arrested and killed. Tahirih herself was arrested and brutally murdered. And it is reported that before she was executed, she said, "You can kill me as soon as you like, but you can never stop the emancipation of women."
May warring waves be banished from the world. Let justice everywhere its carpets throw. May friendship ancient hatreds reconcile. May love grow from the seed of love we sow. Love we sow.
The popularity of the Bab grew to such an extent that the authorities finally saw that there was no other way to stop the spread of his faith but to execute him. So in 1850, the order for his execution was issued.
When the Bab addresses the crowd in the square in Tabriz to this army who has been tasked with this terrible kind of mission to put to death one of God's messengers. And I think it's very poignant because here the Bab is with this young devotee beside him, Anis, who wanted to give his all. The Bab then, he actually uses Anis as an example to the crowd.
Had you believed in me, O wayward generation, every one of you would have followed the example of this youth, who stood in rank above most of you. The day will come when you will have recognized me. That day, I shall have ceased to be with you.
One of the things that the heart is drawn to in relation to the martyrdom of the Bab, I think, is this idea of sacrifice. His only motivation was to carry the message of God to humanity.
This plant started as a tiny seed. Then the seed germinated to become a new plant. Just like the seed, if the Bab had not sacrificed himself, we would not have known Baha'u'llah. The Bab means the gate. He came to open the way to a new revelation, to bring about a new civilization.
The authorities thought that they had snuffed out the light of the Bab. But really, with his execution, a new power had been released into the world. He had made a decisive break with the past and prepared the way for the coming of him whom God shall make manifest, Baha'u'llah.
Baghdad, April 1863. Baha'u'llah, one of the few prominent supporters of the Bab to survive the massacres of the previous years, declares to his companions that he is the great divine educator heralded by the Bab. For the next 3 decades, uninterrupted divine revelation flows from Baha'u'llah's pen, inspiring people from every background to discover their noblest qualities and create a new pattern of life. For bringing these teachings to humanity, Baha'u'llah endures imprisonment, torture, and exile. But the fire lit by the Bab, now rekindled and fanned into flame by Baha'u'llah, cannot be extinguished. Baha'u'llah counsels humanity. O contending peoples and kindreds of the earth, set your faces towards unity, and let the radiance of its light shine upon you.
The unquestionable truth is love. Love is what we share with everyone in our society. Love is the reason we exist.
Peoples of the earth, verily the resplendent light of God hath appeared in your midst, invested with this unerring book, that ye may be guided aright to the ways of peace, and by the leave of God step out of the darkness into the light, and onto this far extended path of truth.
But millions of people in the world have a spiritual connection to the Bab. In fact, everyone, all of humanity, has a spiritual connection to the Bab and Baha'u'llah. They came for all people to come together as one family.
Circle round.